everyone, Dan here, and today we're doing things a little bit differently. This is the ranking of every film that I watched in April and May of 2026.
Take a look at the long man beating up the wrong guy. Oh man, wonder if you'll ever know who's in the best-selling show. Is their life on Mars?
So I feel like I'd start all these monthly film rankings this year the same way. It's like I've been busy and I've lost track of things. Yeah, I really lost track of things these past 2 months. Yeah, things got incredibly busy. You know, in end of April, I was doing a show, Don't Trust Dinner. Hopefully the podcast of that one should be out soon. And that kind of bled into May with like a lot of uni work. And again, things just kept cropping up and it got to a point where it was like there was no point to do the April film ranking at the beginning of May. So I thought, why not wait it out until the end of May into June, where I could combine both months and like do like a bi-monthly ranking in a sense. Considering as well, as I say, with how busy I was, I hadn't watched as many films across April and May, but it meant that putting them together, you get a good sized list and whatnot. Although ironically, there are less films on this ranking, which comprises of 2 months, than there are in the January ranking, which is only 1 month, which is quite ironic. But that's that's what happens. Like particularly during the winter, you have more time to watch films. You're more in the mood to watch films and whatnot. Whereas in the summer, especially with the heat we've had recently, I'm just not as inclined to be stuck in and watching films like as often. So that also plays a part in it. So this list comprises of 18 films, 10 from April and 8 in May. So, as I say, not loads across either month, but you put it together, you get a good sized list. But honestly, it's a fairly unremarkable month for a lot of it. Like, there's a fair bit of like mediocrity, and it's not a great month overall. But we do have some gems in there. But yeah, it's just a very odd selection of films. This is, I gotta say. But let's not waste any time. We've got plenty of films to get through, so let's get cracking. So you're probably wondering, why, Dan, did you watch a shit Steven Seagal movie, Sniper Special Ops, for it to be at the bottom of the list? Well, I mentioned my show, Don't Dress as Dinner, which I did back in April, and one of my castmates, Cameron, shout out to you, he got us talking about just shit bad movies, like funny bad movies to react to, and he mentioned like Steven Seagal movies, like late stage Steven Seagal movies where he's like a parody of himself. Like he'd mentioned a reaction channel who reacts to like these bad movies, and Sniper Special Ops was the first one, their reaction of it, that he showed me. So I was like, you know what, I will watch this whole film. I'll watch the whole film. And oh my god, it was absolutely terrible. Like, it was funny. Like, there was some ironic appeal, obviously. Like, Steven Seagal, 60 years old, he's overweight, and he's trying to be this cool American sniper guy, and it's embarrassing to watch. It's, why does he walk like that? Why does he move like that? Why does he talk like that? What is he doing? Why did they just reuse the same shot of him at that sniper post? It's ridiculous. And, like, it is genuinely funny, but it also, after, like, 15, 20 minutes, the novelty wears off, and it becomes the most generic, mind-numbing American Middle Eastern war movie you've ever seen in your life, and it's just, Jesus, man, this is terrible. This month I also watched the Pitch Perfect trilogy, and you know what? These are solid films, except for the third one, which makes second to bottom on this list, and it's just a really anticlimactic end to this trilogy. Despite it only coming out 2 years after the second film, it just feels a lot later. Like, it feels like the cast like reuniting after like 10 years, and I get that's the whole premise of the film, but there's something about it that just feels off. It just feels played out, tired. The characters feel like heightened parodies of themselves. The scenarios are more ridiculous, and whereas, fun and pulpy and poppy as the Pitch Perfect films are, they are still relatively grounded, but this one just feels ridiculous, and despite the odd good moment, it just feels like a bit of a damp squiv ending for the trilogy, and it deserved better. Our first 2026 movie on this list, the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which I've done a podcast on the Double Feature podcast. We did that back in April, so you can check out my full thoughts there. But overall, I thought the first Mario movie was fine. This movie is even more fine, if not even more generic and mediocre, and like looks nice, the animation's nice, it's harmless, but I really have no opinions on this film, no strong opinions on the film anyway. I mean, the plot is incredibly bare bones, there's so many Easter eggs which, as a non-fan, I get nothing out of, so I just don't feel anything strong at all towards this one. I just don't get anything out of it, and it's just basically just noise. That's all this film is for me. Another new release, which again has a similar feel to the Mario Galaxy movie, is The Mandalorian and Grogu, the first Star Wars film in 7 years to hit the cinemas, and yeah, it has the similar feel of it just feels like noise. It feels, yes, it's harmless, like it's not offensively bad, not anything outrageously bad, like Attack of the Clones, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker, but it's ultimately just a really dull, flat experience. Whether it's the visuals, it looks more television than what you would expect to see on the big screen. The plot basically is just a few episodes of the show mashed into a film. The music is actually pretty solid for the most part, but I really miss the main Star Wars theme. Where is that? The characters, it's just the same old stuff like Mando and Grogu. Yeah, they're fine, but they don't really add anything new here. It's just the same old, they're going on missions, going on quests. The fan service and returning characters. And look, I get more out of this than Mario because I am a Star Wars fan, so I know who Zeb is from Rebels, I know Embo from the Clone Wars, I know Rod of the Hutt from the Clone Wars movie from 2008. But even as a fan, I don't really get much out of them because they're not really adding anything to these characters, just they're there. It's just noise and there's not a lot added. So I just feel empty, even though I am a Star Wars fan, I recognise all this stuff, but it's just a hollow experience, and that's really disappointing for a Star Wars movie. Next up we have the Into the Woods movie from 2014. Now, I've not seen the stage show, but it's obviously quite an iconic musical, obviously a Stephen Sondheim musical, so cracking songs and whatnot, and yeah, the songs are great, like there's some cracking music, but I don't love this movie, and I feel like the premise is great, but a lot of my goodwill from it comes from probably more so from the stuff that's already in the stage show, because I don't think this film does it justice. Like, the premise is really cool with all these, like, you know, recognisable fairy tale characters kind of in the same universe and kind of crossover. I kind of like that idea, and, you know, I do like all that sort of stuff, but it's just the execution. It feels quite visually quite drab and quite dull. I don't really get much out of it. Some of the actors feel a bit random, like James Corden. Why is he here? Why is he narrating the bloody thing? And even though I've not seen the stage show, I've seen like versions of it in terms of like sort of like snippets and stills from it, and it looks so much more wondrous and, you know, it has more mystique and majesty to it that this just doesn't really have. This just feels drab. I just don't care for it that much. Next up is a bit of a modern classic. We've got Taken, and I say that somewhat ironically because it is a bit of a punching bag, I think, because Liam Neeson has basically made this film for the best part of 20 years. It's essentially just this formula over and over again. But I was genuinely curious to watch Taken. Obviously, you know, it's a well-known action thriller, but also I wanted to see what is the appeal of this film that has made it basically just define Neeson's late-stage career. And yeah, whilst it is overall a fairly by-the-book action thriller that is a bit OTT and a bit cheesy at points, I do see the appeal. Like, the story is fairly formulaic, but it's a winning formula. Like, it's a fairly easy-to-follow story. The characters, they're a bit stock, but they are ultimately quite universal, like, where you can easily connect with them. It's a simple struggle of a guy trying to find his daughter and save her, but it's a universal kind of thing, and anyone can really connect with that. And ultimately, it's just an enjoyable little romp, like, globe-trotting little romp. You know, all these action set pieces. The phone call scene is rightfully iconic because it is awesome, and it is a solid little action film. It's nothing amazing, but I do see the appeal. Another new release here, Lee Cronin's The Mummy, which we've also done a podcast on the Double Feature podcast, so I'll keep my opinions brief here, but overall, a very ambitious film, incredibly gory, which is very effective, and the film takes some bold swings and, you know, has some very unique ideas throughout, but because it's taking such bold swings, it can be a bit rough at points, particularly in the structure. It definitely is a very uneven film, particularly in that sense, but it's definitely bold and distinct, and I do respect a lot of it in that sense, so it's a very interesting film. Jesus Christ, okay. Next up, we've got Teen Beach Movie. It's a Disney Channel original movie. This ain't high art, folks, this ain't, but I kind of vibed with this movie, I can't lie, but it's stupid. It's really, really stupid. The premise is a boy and a girl, you know, living on the coast, and they get transported into this like 60s beach party movie called Wet Side Story, which I play on West Side Story, but instead of it like being sort of in the city and whatnot, it's this gang of like bikers versus surfers. It's a really stupid out there premise, but I kind of respect it. It's just a bit of fun. The songs are actually kind of fun, and they kind of do slap some of them, and it's really cheesy and dumb, but I genuinely did get a lot of that. I think because obviously hot summer weather recently, I think I was just kind of in the mood for it. It just felt right, and it was just, as I say, it's really dumb, really stupid. The acting is Disney Channel acting, but it's a bit of fun, you know. Back on to the Pitch Perfect films with Pitch Perfect 2. It's not amazing, this one. It's kind of just more of the same from the first film, but in saying that, it's given me more of the stuff that I like, which is more of the interaction with the Bellas, who are, you know, There are fun little ensemble of characters, and the song a cappella covers, which, again, there's plenty of fun numbers in this film as well. This film also has the "what an odd thing to say" meme, which I was like, oh, that's where this comes from. I say, I don't really have much to say about this one, but it's kind of more of the same, but what I'm getting is still enjoyable, so I'm not really complaining. Next we have Licorice Pizza. It is Paul Thomas Anderson film, and I wanted to watch more PTA after loving Punch Drunk Love and One Battle After Another, and I gotta say, Licorice Pizza doesn't quite hold a candle to those two, because those two are incredible. This one's just good. In fact, I do remember this coming out back in late 2021, and I remember a lot of people saying it was quite, I remember it being quite divisive, because obviously the subject matter is a bit taboo, to be fair. Yeah, in terms of this film, what do I think of it? I think it's just good, but it's got some flaws. I think overall, the vibe of it, I love. The cinematography, the colours, the costumes, it all looks gorgeous. Like, it captures that 70s feel amazingly. The music, the cast, it has a great aesthetic, and it's a great film to just vibe to. And on that level, I think it excels with like flying colours, quite literally. But honestly, it's been over a month since I watched it, and that's kind of all I've got from it. I don't really remember much about the characters. Like, I think, you know, Gary and Alana, they have decent chemistry, but as characters, they're not as defined as, say, Barry is in Punch Drunk Love, or a lot of the ensemble in One Battle. Obviously, there's the whole age gap romance with those guys, and I'm somebody who, you know, I think you can cover any topic in film, no matter how taboo it is, so long as it's in good taste. And while I don't think it's overall in bad taste as such, I think it is trying to have that kind of young, misguided love about it all, but then it tries to kind of romanticize it, and it's like, what are we really doing here? Especially with that ending, which is just far too squeaky clean for it to really be the ending it deserves. And it's just like, no, what are we doing here? My opinions on this film aren't out of like offense or disgust. It's more just like, that's just not compelling. It's just not warranted. It's not justified like narratively, and it doesn't work. And yeah, overall, it just, I don't know, it just feels a bit more hazy and a bit less bold and defined as PTA's other work, which is a shame. Okay, Jesus Christ. I told you this list was random because we've got Sniper Special Ops, we've got Teen Beach Movie, and now we've got Dude, Where's My Car? And the fact that this film has cracked the top 10 of this list and is in the top half, I don't know if that says anything about the films that I've watched being bad, or if my taste has just been warped completely. I don't know, but mate, Dude, Where's My Car is absolute cinema. Okay, I should probably explain for those not in the know. So Dude, Where's My Car? It's a 2000 stoner comedy, and it was a film discussed on the Double Feature podcast by myself and Mr. L in our classic movie section. And this was, I think, 4 episodes when we did Mickey 17, so it would have been about a year and a bit ago now, where we, in our classic movie section, where we talk about older films, spotlight some, you know, in that episode we talked about some comedy films. That was kind of our topic. And Mr. R brought up Dude, Where's My Car? And he was explaining all these funny bits and these lines from it and all this random stuff from it. And I was completely bewildered. And it's one of those films, it's one of the few films from the podcast that has kind of become a bit of a running joke between us both, and, you know, constantly does get brought up in you know, between both of us. And so I was like, I've got to watch it eventually, and I did, and it's amazing. Okay, obviously, objectively speaking, it's not amazing. Like, if I was being objective, this would be, like, near the bottom of the list, because it is, in speaking, quite poor. You know, the acting is pretty rough, especially from the two leads, I can't lie. Production-wise, it is a bit ropey. It's 2000s stoner comedy, and again, some of the jokes are funny, but also some of them are very much just typical gross-out, dated jokes of that era. But where I will give this film props, it is kind of created the whole, like, because there's a whole, like, alien sci-fi twist to this, and you know what? I kind of respect how bold that is. And, like, you know, obviously the iconic lines from this film, like the "and then" and the "dude, sweet," all this sort of stuff that Mr. L's been teasing for the longest time. When these scenes came up, I was like I got so hyped and excited because I was like, oh my god, it's the scene! It's a good laugh, and I think, yeah, it's just a bit of fun. But as I'm saying, you know, that's what I'm kind of trying to embrace more and more, is that, you know, I'm not just judging films purely on, like, kind of an objective level. I also let my experience with them influence my opinion. So the fact that I have this history with this film, and the fact that it's become such an in-joke between a good friend of mine, that can positively influence where I put the film. And I want to kind of get that across, is that it doesn't have to be, you know, the objective best whatever. Like, I've put it above a Paul Thomas Anderson film. Licorice Pizza got a Best Picture nomination, for Christ's sake. and I prefer this dumb 2000s stoner comedy to that. Okay, now we're in the territory of films that you're probably more familiar with in terms of like me and the kind of stuff that I tend to like. It's been a very interesting list, but we're kind of back into more familiar territory for me, starting with a 50s musical, and it's kind of familiar with me. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. The first time watching this, and honestly, it's a pretty solid film, and it's rightfully iconic. It's not an amazing film, like I say, it's just good in my opinion. Like, the plot is not particularly noteworthy, it's fairly bog standard, but where the film excels is with the vibe. Like, the production values are stellar. It's so vibrant and colourful, the costume is so awesome, the musical numbers are great, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, need I say more, like one of the most iconic musical sequences in film, and it's easy to see why. Then obviously you've got the dynamic of Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell, who are a winning combination. Monroe is just one of those endlessly charismatic actors who, you know, just a true movie star of her day, and the appeal is there to see, and it's just, she's great. While I said the plot was a bit ho-hum, the dialogue is very witty in this film. I mean, it's written by Charles Leader, so he wrote like His Girl Friday, very great American screenwriter of the era, and has a lot of witty dialogue, and some interesting ideas planted throughout the film, which I think makes it worth it. And it's just a, you know, a cracking little breezy watch of the era. Close Encounters of the Third Kind is kind of like Jaws, but with aliens instead of sharks. And I mean that in a good way. I don't mean that to be dismissive, but obviously Spielberg had previously to this made Jaws, and obviously used that kind of less is more technique to show the shark's terror in that film, you know, obviously because of the budget limitations. And I feel like you see some of that techniques here with the aliens. Obviously, they don't show the aliens until the very end, and you don't really see them. You just know of their presence through the lights, colours, sounds, objects moving, technology sort of whirring and whatnot. And it's a great way to use, you know, small things to imply something much grander. It creates the sense of mystery, intrigue, suspense, but also whimsy and, you know, wonder. And that's what Spielberg is a master of. He blends, you know, the darker elements of like tension and suspense with childlike wonder and whimsy, and he marries the two perfectly. Like one of those early scenes when like all the kids like toys like start wearing and whatnot, like kids' electronic toys, and you know, there's an element of, you know, mystery, but there is that whimsy. I think because it's through the perspective of a child, you as a viewer, you have that whimsy too and whatnot. But also the core of the film, there's that, you know, strong character dynamics. Obviously you've got Richard Dreyfuss and his obsession to know what's going on, to try and find out what this is. You know, he's a compelling lead. You've got Francois Truffaut in this film, but he's really cool to see in the film. And then you've got the family drama with Roy and his family and whatnot, and it hits pretty close to home. I think if you've watched The Fabelmans, the biographic film that Spielberg did, you will see that this is one of Spielberg's more personal films, and you really feel that, especially with the conflict of Roy and his wife and his kids and stuff. You really feel that element. It does feel very personal to him, and it feels very genuine and raw and authentic. I think that's what makes the film really effective, as well as some fantastic visuals and an iconic John Williams score, which kind of goes for most of his scores. But this is iconic. Like, everybody knows the 5-note jingle, but you know, everybody knows that, and I love how it's baked into the story. I love that. It's really clever. But yeah, Close Encounters, a great early Spielberg film, and obviously with Disclosure Day coming out, you know, a new Spielberg film about aliens and whatnot and the extraterrestrial. It's, you know, I think it's kind of cool to see where Spielberg started with that genre. Another 70s classic, we have Cabaret by Bob Fosse. Now, this is an interesting one. I've not seen the stage show, and I'm aware that the stage show is quite different, but this 1972 film is very interesting. And like most of Bob Fosse's work, it takes a bit of time for you to really appreciate what it's going for, because in the moment it is very unique and sometimes quite unconventional how it's presented, that it's not always easy to kind of get what it's going for in the moment. But I do really appreciate a lot of what this film does. I mean, it's a gorgeous looking film. The sets, production design, it looks gorgeous. The musical numbers are so well staged. Joel Grey as the MC, an absolute scene stealer, and, you know, rightfully deserved his Oscar. And on top of that, you've got Liza Minnelli, who, again, an absolute scene stealer, and, you know, deserved her Oscar as well, as Sally Bowles, like an absolute icon of musical theatre. And the songs are great. I mean, those two in Money, that's a fantastic little number. There's also very, like, snappy pace and edit to this film. Like, the cuts feel quite snappy and harsh, and it just feels a bit more intense than your average Golden Age musical from the 50s and 60s. This feels like a product of the early 70s, of that new Hollywood era, where it's taking what had come before in the golden age of Hollywood, but then giving it a bit of a harsher, darker edge. And that applies to the story, the whole kind of creeping air of fascism in Berlin during the 1930s. That's the whole kind of backdrop of the film, and how that's presented is also really interesting. And it's that slow, methodical unraveling of fascism in that time period. And I do think that's a really interesting approach. I think what kind of saves this film a little bit, it's the romance with Sally and Brian. It just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't feel nearly as interesting as a lot of what else is going on in the film. It feels quite normal, and that's not on paper a problem. Like, in execution, there's not really much there. I don't really get much chemistry between the two. And Michael York, I like him as an actor, but I don't really get a lot from him in this film. And when he's paired with Liza bloody Minnelli, it highlights that disparity even more, I think. But overall, Cabaret is a really, really strong film, and it is definitely growing on me the more that I think back on it. I never thought that Pitch Perfect would be a film that I really, really got into, but oh my god, I kind of love this film. Like, as a musical guy, as a musical theatre guy as well, I get a lot out of this. I love the a cappella covers, it's so great. These covers are amazing. I love the cast of characters. They just click really well, and it, honestly, like, at the heart of it, like, it is really poppy and really fun and lighthearted. But there is a really sweet story of, you know, people of all different backgrounds and all different ideas coming together to create something bigger and better than themselves with the Bellas and their performances. And I think there's genuinely something really sweet about that. Like, it's got a lot of heart, and that's what I get out of this, particularly this original film. There is a hell of a lot of heart to this film, and yes, it's fun, but it's really endearing, and you just really connect with it. And I did not expect that. It's a fairly simple, straightforward film, and it's just really solid. It just does what it does really confidently, and just really well. Back in the top three, we have John Woo's The Killer, one of the best action thrillers of the 1980s. And I think, you know, coming in 1989, this was, you know, the era where the big muscle men like Schwarzenegger, Stallone, they were kind of on the way out, and a leaner, slicker style of action film was on the way in, which you'd see a lot in like the 90s and noughties. This, you feel the influence of this on stuff like Reservoir Dogs and plenty of other crime action capers of the era and whatnot. You feel this film's influence, and rightfully so, because it is such a distinct film of its time. I love the aesthetic of this film, the style. It's so, I say, lean and slick and so stylish. So you feel the impact of so much of, you know, the gunfights. They are fairly low stakes, not low stakes, but they're fairly grounded. It's not over the top, but you feel the impact of everything, especially towards the start. You have the one woman who is blinded by a gunshot, and, you know, you feel the impact of these fairly low stakes action sequences. It really makes them come alive. You've got a great cast of characters who have a great dynamic with each other, and they feel quite grounded. I think because the film takes its time, it's more of a slow, methodical character piece as much as it is an action film. But you get grounded with these characters, and then in that final act it all comes alive, and it's a really solid film. And I really want to check out more of John Woo's stuff like Hard Boiled. I want to check out, and obviously, you know, he's gone on to Hollywood like with Face Off and Mission Impossible 2, but I'm genuinely curious to check out some more of his earlier work in Hong Kong. I was keen to check out I Swear, the biopic film about John Davidson, a Scottish man with Tourette syndrome who has been an advocate for the condition for many years and has really raised awareness about it. And, you know, I really wanted to check out this film because, you know, it's got a lot of attention, a lot of hype as for a British independent film like this. Obviously, there was the incident at the BAFTAs that happened with John that I think for a lot of people has kind of clouded this film, and I wanted to separate that incident from me, what I thought of this film. But obviously, there's a whole lot surrounding this topic, and what I'll preface this with is I've had some great conversations with people with Tourette's about this film, about the kind of the aftermath of all of this and whatnot, and I encourage you guys to do the same as well. Like with any film about a topic that isn't necessarily in your wheelhouse, you know, I don't have Tourette's, so my opinion is not gospel here. Like I encourage you to seek the, you know, viewpoints of the pair, and, you know, there's been some great discussions that I've had, and very informative, very interesting discussions. Overall, I really did love I Swear. I think it's a really strong biopic drama. Like, it's a fairly straightforward narrative, and it's not particularly breaking new ground, and, you know, that goes for like the narrative, storytelling, and the filmmaking as well. It's not amateur. Like this, it's a competently made film, and there's a few like pretty interesting shots here and there and whatnot, and some cool editing occasionally, but it's not particularly flashy or showy. It's fairly straightforward because it's trying to let the subject matter speak for itself, and it really does do it well. Especially the performances, like Robert Aramayo is fantastic as John, as well as Maxine Peake as Dottie. They're some great performances, and there's plenty of great British faces in this as well. But it is really impactful. It is really hard-hitting at points, but also there's a lot of empathy. There's a lot of agency given to John, and showing his perspective on things. That's something I really appreciate about this kind of film. And whilst I do get why some people would see this as a bit sort of standard biopic sort of stuff, I do think it's really strong. And even with somebody who doesn't have Tourette's, but somebody who is neurodivergent, I see a lot of myself and John in some of these scenarios, and I think there's plenty that anybody can connect with this film, and I think it's just a really, really strong film. I highly recommend checking it out and making your mind up on it. I would really recommend it. And at number 1, we have my favourite Star Wars film, Return of the Jedi. I watched this for May the 4th this year, and as I say, this has always been my favourite Star Wars film, and I've always loved it, and it's just one of my favourite movies, period. I mean, I'll defend stuff like the Ewoks and the second Death Star, the kind of flaws that people have with the film, till my last breath. I love it. I love the stuff on Endor. I love the stuff with Jabba's Palace at the beginning. It's just a really effective opener. Luke Skywalker has never been cooler than he is in this film. Palpatine is amazing. It's got the best space battle of the franchise with the Battle of Endor. I love the ground battle stuff. I adore the duel on the second Death Star with Luke and Vader. And for me, it's the character stuff and how this film really resolves the whole trilogy. It brings everything together that really is impactful. Yeah, I can go on about the epic Sarlacc pit fight or the duel or the space battle, but it's these quieter moments, stuff like Luke and Leia's talk on the bridge on Endor, when Vader and Luke meet and they're talking on the other bridge on Endor. The moment after Vader sacrificed himself to kill the Emperor and he's dying, these quieter moments, they hit really hard. It's also such a really funny film as well. There's some great camaraderie, especially like Han, he's just brilliant in this film. I just will forever love this film. It is my favourite Star Wars film personally, and it's the one where the emotional high, everything is kind of at its peak here, and I just adore it. So that's it, my ranking for every film I watched in April and May this year, ranked, all that sort of stuff. So I'll divide the 2 months, so I'll put on screen now my ranking for just April and my ranking for just May, so for completion's sake, you can get an idea of where all the films will kind of sort of appear in their respective months. And the fact that Dude, Where's My Car, it's still in the top half of its list, even when you remove all the other films from April, it's still in the top half. That is, if you'd have asked me that a year ago, I wouldn't have believed you. But this is where we are. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. As I say, sorry for the delay with this one, but I hope you enjoy this kind of bumper edition of the rankings. And what are any of your thoughts on these films? What have you watched across these past 2 months? And until next time, I'll see you later. Take care.